You'll see overhead shots where we did a drone shot from her house to his house, and it's seamless. The actual house we shot at was built in the 1860s, so an old Victorian era house. Those colors and the wallpaper really set a tone for that house. Hi, I'm Lauren Weeks. I'm the production designer for the new Netflix show, The Beast in Me, and we are going behind the scenes with Collider. The sets themselves, I don't consider particularly a challenge. Aggie's house, of course, was the most interesting one because opportunity for so much character and backstory and so forth. One of the challenges I found was the fact that finding a believable sort of situation where you would have Aggie, granted, she's a new Pulitzer Prize winner and doing well, but she's living next door to a very, very wealthy real estate tycoon. And there's a big disparity of income there, and how do you justify it? And we didn't call it as such, but we did find a community where we had that kind of combination of house. Then it could make sense in my head anyway. So it was wanting to find me those two houses that seemed to work together in this one community, a house that would be for Aggie that you would believe could be next door to Niles, but also that you could believe she could afford. So that was to me the biggest challenge.
Mrs. Wiggs?
Yes.
Apologies about the dogs.
This house is very aspirational for Aggie. I think she was the force behind moving. She and Shelley originally were living in, I think it was Greenpoint, Brooklyn in the story. And I think Aggie was trying to create a home family life that she never had. She was flush from having won the Pulitzer Prize for fiction. She had a new book deal. It was very lucrative. I think they were feeling very optimistic and, everything was great. Everything was moving their way. And they saw this house and yeah, it was more than they could chew. They bit off more than they can chew. But part of the reason they were able to get it is that it needed a lot of work. The actual house we shot at was built in the 1860s. So an old Victorian era house, just this magnificent structure. The real house, the interiors have been greatly redone and are quite beautiful. We took liberties on the interior and created our own look. And I wanted to create a sense of timelessness to it, that I didn't want to tie it in, other than the actual architecture, I didn't want to try to tie it into any one time period, but wanted to give the sense that there was a long history to this house. And they moved in, they just barely scratched the surface of renovating and restoring when the tragedy happened with their son and their marriage fell apart. And Aggie's left with this big rambling house and writer's block, and unable to sort of move forward. So there was a lot of very careful consideration of what went in that house. The furnishings, of course, would be hers, but the finishes on the walls, the wallpaper and paint, so forth, would have been there when they moved in. I figured her office, she would have moved in there and repainted, and that's her real source of her identity. Your home office is very personal. So she would have done that. They had actually redone their son's room, and they had started some work on the kitchen. Then everything just came to a halt.
Why don't you come into my office? We can chat.
Well, there's not much to chat about, really. I'm afraid my answer is no.
That was the other crucial thing to find. And we searched and we would go down one path and say, this is just not working after all. It's not really quite Niles' character. I don't think we actually found his house until very, very close to when we started shooting. So that was a challenge. There was a spacious quality we were looking for. What house we found had very large rooms, nice flow to it. The decor was, there was a degree of that which was already correct for what we were looking for. We didn't want it to feel too old and too old money, because he's new money. For his house, we had much less control because this is someone's home. We didn't change the wall colors in there. We worked with them. But with the terms of the dressing, the living and so forth, we're going for more of a kind of a monochrome look to that. The artwork there was very important because his wife has a gallery. So that was working very closely with Tony Campos, our director, making sure we're all seeing eye to eye on that.
Yeah, I guess we better start locking our doors.
You'd think he'd want to be a little more discreet.
Aggie's house. There was a new line of paint I had come across just before I started on the show. The company is called Tonester, and they have this beautiful line of paints. Every color has a lot of black in it. And I used at least 3 or 4 of their colors, or inspired by their colors, on Aggie's set. Those colors and the wallpaper really set a tone for that house. Why those colors? Well, I think it helped to create this kind of dark and moody feel in the house. A little bit gothic, contributed to the sense of shadows and depth and melancholy.
You broke into my house?
You've captured me, I gotta say.
The houses were nowhere near each other. At least half an hour, I think. So there's no way she walked next door to his house. But you'll see overhead shots where we did a drone shot from her house to his house, and it's seamless. You would see her leave her house, for instance, and we'd pick her up on the street where Niles' house was. And there's a similar enough feeling to the neighborhoods, to these two communities, in terms of the streets, the width of the streets, the foliage. They blended pretty well. Weather's always an issue. In episode 1, where she goes out to lunch with Niles, there's scripted a rainstorm at the end of that day, which you see when the FBI agent is banging on her door and it's pouring down rain. And that was all on a soundstage, so we had rain effect there. We were very concerned about how the weather was going to respond for the exterior scene outside the restaurant when they're leaving the restaurant and they see the driver who was party to the crash that killed their son. And we were very lucky that it actually started to sprinkle and it was overcast. So that worked out beautifully.
How lucky we got with the weather.
You can come banging on my door in the pouring rain in the middle of the night, drunk?
You definitely have to have that line of communication with the DP, the props department. Of course, everybody under my purview, which is construction, scenic, set tech, props, just constant good lines of communication and review and touching base all the time. You got a lot of balls in the air. Sometimes you focus on this one, sometimes that one. And irons in the fire, maybe that's a better analogy. I can't recall of anything specific to this project, but that happens all the time. You're discussing something with wardrobe designer and talking about color because you want to make sure what they're doing works with what you're doing and working towards the same goal. So personally, I'm always open to ideas from anybody. In my department, certainly from anywhere else. Lyle Vincent, our cinematographer, he suggested something which I thought was just really great. Just the orientation of Niles' office. And he had a recommendation for that was like perfect. It was exactly how it should have been. I think in the show, the thing I'm most proud of is Aggie's house. It was a character itself in the show. And sometimes that's a really wonderful thing. Other times, I think production design should take a back seat. And if it's good, you don't even know what's been done. But I do think that the house was a character. It was a metaphor for her life, I think, and hopefully not too heavy-handed. You always kind of worry about that. There was so much hope and promise, I think, put into that house when they bought it that never came to life. And one other thing about that house that was important was that it be large. Because I think when you're trying to portray isolation and loneliness, visually it works very well when you put a person in a situation where you expect a lot of people, like a very large house where you would expect a large family and a lot of activity, and she's there by herself. And the camera was able to get a real distance and shoot through hallways and see these shadows and see these rooms, and they're all empty and lifeless. Or a person in Grand Central Station and there's nobody else there. Or 28 days later, when main character wakes up and he's wandering through the streets, completely void of life, right? And you feel that isolation, that loneliness. So a big rambling house was important to me.
Oh, that's amazing. Lauren, thank you so much for your time. It's such a pleasure talking with you and learning about all these things, behind the scenes of the series. I'm really excited for people to kind of see exactly what went into these things and what things symbolize. Such a pleasure meeting you, and thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Appreciate it.